Hey listen, so a couple weeks ago I released a video showing what I thought to be the best voice memories from Breath of the Wild. These are recordings of Zelda's findings as she travels through Hyrule before the Great Calamity happened back in Breath of the Wild, which released on the Nintendo app along with the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild. Now of course Tears of the Kingdom got the same kind of treatment, and actually not only did we get to hear from Zelda this time, but we also got to hear from King Rauru and Master Koga, totaling to around 240 memories total between them all. So today, I'm going to discuss which of the 15 out of these 240 I found to be the most interesting. Now, in Tears of the Kingdom, we got to learn so many more things about the mysterious Zonai, howbeit maybe just enough info to make them even more mysterious. But we did get to learn some things about them and get to see how they kind of lived, seeing some of the structures in the Sky Islands, including another Temple of Time. Now, this is what Rauru had to say about this place.
The Temple of Time is a bell tower and faithful timekeeper, as well as a spiritual center of this land. It was constructed in a traditional Zonai architectural style that extends both up into the sky and down into the ground. It was believed in ancient times that such a design could pierce through evil.
Now, this description of how and why this temple was constructed the way that it was is a callback to another Zelda game, another game in the series that actually has Sky Islands. In Skyward Sword, toward the end of the game, Link is able to make a wish to the gods that Demise would be destroyed. This is accomplished by a part of the main Sky Island of Skyward Sword breaking off and falling to the surface below. It actually falls into a chasm where it sat before it was raised into the sky. We see it completely flatten Demise and eliminate him. Of course, that wasn't the end of this game and there was a lot of twists and turns. Still yet, the Sky Island was able to do as Rauru had described and pierce through this evil. The Zonai, who were said to live in the heavens, perhaps heard of how this evil was eradicated, and since their homes were floating chunks of land, maybe they designed these structures so that if they ever needed to fall to the surface, they could pierce through evil once again. Now, one of the coolest new islands that you can find up in Hyrule Sky is Lightcast Island. Apparently it was actually a training ground for someone with Rauru or Zelda's power of light. And here's what Rauru had to say about this island.
This island is a training site for those who carry the power of light. By practicing at length with this power, one can grow strong enough to overcome great evil. To recall all the times I had visited this place in my youth.
Now, Rauru's description here, for some reason, makes me wonder how commonplace it was for someone to have such a power. I mean, we know it's not just a one-off and Rauru has it because Zelda has it as well. Obviously, it's a hereditary ability similar to how we've seen 3 people use the lightning ability in the Gerudo tribe in these games. But the description makes me wonder if there were other Zonai with such an ability. For some reason, it makes me think of an air temple in The Last Airbender where there's numerous monks, so maybe there were numerous little Zonai running around with the ability of light. Not that it's impossible or that far-fetched to believe that such a place could be created for just one individual. I mean, the Sheikah created 120 shrines so that Link could hone his abilities, and he's just one guy. That's a lot of effort for one dude, by the way. But could there be an army of light-wielding Zonai warriors that existed in the past? Now, in my video on Breath of the Wild's voice memories, we see where Zelda talked about the frozen area on the Great Plateau, and how it seemed to be unnatural. Here is that full memory.
Past this gate is a snowy landscape, cold enough for one to freeze there. The area is a place where heroes can test their skills, but the landscape is clearly not a natural phenomenon. Perhaps some ancient technology we have yet to learn about is being used here.
Now, I mentioned in that video how I personally always thought it seemed out of place, and to hear Zelda confirm that was actually really, really cool. But then Rauru in Tears of the Kingdom takes us a little bit further with the area on the Great Sky Island that is also covered in snow in a very, very almost identical way.
It was here that we used the capabilities of frost emitters to create a permanently snowy region. By encircling the island in cold air, we created an ideal place to test the durability of constructs and Zonai devices. I'll always remember the look of wonder on Sonia's face the first time we came here.
So I guess the answer is frost emitters, which I believe would also be how it's done on the Great Plateau. There are frost emitters, I presume, hidden everywhere to create this small frozen area, perhaps originally to test the durability of constructs. I mean, the Zonai were on the surface, at least some in the past, but it's possible that that same concept was just passed down. Instead of using constructs, they said, hey, we don't have these little robots no more, but, you know, go test out your strength, Joe. Now, when you first start Breath of the Wild, you walk onto a giant plateau that is completely desolate, and the only companion that you can find turns out later to be a dead king's ghost. So I've always wondered, while the king was walking around in the first hour or so of the game as a mountain man, where did the hut of the plateau come from? Did a ghost really build it for the sake of making it look like his mountain life was real, or was it abandoned home of someone else that he just used during this time? Well, Tears of the Kingdom's voice memories actually gave us an answer to that.
When I last visited this mountain hut 100 years ago, I did not realize who the owner was. Now that I do, it explains why Father looked so troubled, even sad, when I described the building as shabby and in need of demolition. How could I have guessed it was his own little retreat? Though, looking at it now... Oh, Father, did you build this yourself?
Apparently, during the king's life, this was a place that he used to get away kind of from his king duties, I guess. I mean, it's a great place for it, as no one else lives there, and only royal family members were permitted to be here, or at least for the most part, it seems. Of course, Zelda had to destroy the king's feelings before knowing it was his shed and saying that it was in such a bad shape it needed to be demolished. But I think with all the emotional turmoil that he put her through back in Breath of the Wild's 100-year ago time, I think he'll be okay. I do want to say that I think it's actually really cool that the king had a familiar place to go to that he could use for a place of solitude that he used during his life while he was waiting on Link to rise from the Shrine of Resurrection. The Zora and Hylian people in most games seem to have a really close relationship, and often, in fact, seem to have a little bit more of a closer relationship than other races. Tears of the Kingdom actually gives a little bit of an explanation as to how this relationship started, which was the construction of the East Reservoir Lake.
In order to prevent the damage a flooding river would cause, the Zora people and the Kingdom of Hyrule worked together to build this reservoir. In fact, though they were only amicable toward each other before the project, it was the act of building this that formed a true friendship between the Zora and the Kingdom of Hyrule.
So I suppose long ago, when the kingdom was kind of at risk of flooding and being damaged because of the river and the water, these two people groups came together to help protect their shared land, and in doing so created a great relationship that's lasted at this point for, I suppose, tens upon thousands of years, like a really long time, we'll say. Now, the Forgotten Temple is easily one of the hardest locations in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to actually forget. This place is absolutely fascinating to me, and I think many other people. Of course, it's been speculated for a while that it is the Sealed Temple in Skyward Sword, and for a good reason. There are several parallels from these areas, from the goddess statue to the pillars on each side of the walkway to the tree that you can see present on the left side of the building. I think it's apparent that this is the same location, just perhaps changed a bit to fit the world building of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But the voice memory that Zelda gives us for this place in Tears of the Kingdom fascinates me even more.
This structure was clearly designed to take advantage of the geography of the area, but even the interior is largely intact. Considering how many battles have been fought, well, it is very impressive. Seeing it reminds me of some very, very old records I've read. They suggest that there was a temple named for the first Queen of Hyrule, and that it was often used as a shelter for the common people. Could this be...
This memory suggests this temple was named after Queen Sonia, or I suppose renamed if it was the Sealed Temple before, and then even later to the Forgotten Temple. 3 names here. But as we know, in Tears of the Kingdom, there was an additional area added to this place. When the goddess statue is knocked down, a Zonai doorway apparently was hidden behind it. When you walk through this door, you can immediately see a difference in the architecture. The whole of the Forgotten Temple appears to be ancient Hylian architecture up to this point, but past it, it looks just like Zona architecture. We've got dragon monuments on the wall. We actually see this place in a couple of cutscenes in the game. One where Rauru bestows the Zonai secret stones on the Rito, Zora, Goron, and Gerudo sages, and also in the cutscene where we see Rauru and Zelda talking in front of Sonia's grave. A grave which is actually still present in this room with Sundelions on it in present-day Tears of the Kingdom. I believe her body being here and her love for the kingdom that her and Rauru built is why this location was renamed after her, and as Zelda said, was used as a place for refuge for the common people. It's an extremely large area and could house many people after all. Now, in the throne room of Hyrule Castle, behind the throne sits a statue that actually moves. You can actually get the champion's leathers from a treasure chest in this area, but apparently hiding treasure is not what the secret compartment was originally intended for, according to this memory right here.
Though this throne sits vacant, the space it occupies still speaks volumes. For instance, while the sculpture behind the throne is especially sturdy and serves as a hiding place in an emergency, no one that occupied that seat has ever chosen to use it.
The sculpture was made as a vault for the royal family to hide in case of emergencies. Of course, we can't speak to the actions of every generation of the royal family. There are some that were probably more corrupt than others, and I'm sure have lived through times of peace where they didn't even need something like this. But seeing King Rauru and Zelda's father, we do know that there are some kings that have many times, though not been perfect, have been some noble and great kings who would truly lay down their life for their kingdom. Now, one of the things that I think has kind of drove everybody crazy since Tears of the Kingdom is the complete absence of Sheikah tech. The only explanation that we ever got was this interview with director Hidemaru Fujibayashi. They disappeared after the calamity was defeated or sealed. All of the people of Hyrule also witnessed this, but there is no one who knows the mechanism or reason why they disappeared, and it is considered a mystery. It is believed that since the calamity disappeared, they also disappeared as their role had been fulfilled. Which, to be honest, I don't like that answer. But in the Tears of the Kingdom voice memories, Zelda chimes in a little bit and says this.
It seems that when the calamity was defeated, all of the ancient relics here at the Hiteno Ancient Tech Lab turned to dust and disappeared. All that remains are replicas of the originals, and with those gone, these are even more valuable. They will doubtlessly help tell future generations of the history of Hyrule.
So I suppose that Zelda just reaffirmed what had been said. It all disappeared with the calamity. I think personally I could make sense of most of the Guardians and the Divine Beast as they had been corrupted by Ganon's malice, and perhaps when Calamity Ganon disappeared and was sealed, then anything that he had touched, that he had possessed in such a way also vanished. But the part that gets me is all the towers and shrines in the Shrine of Resurrection. However, with this voice memory along with Fujibayashi's statement, it seems that for some unexplained reason it all just vanished with the calamity. And most just think that it served its purpose, and whether we like it or not, just vanished. Now, with Tears of the Kingdom being a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, we got to see characters that we had known in the past, just a few years prior. Some of them hadn't changed much at all, and others had a few notable changes. Riju, in particular, had grown up some since she was so young in the first game, but also had cut her hair. I thought this was just for some personal cosmetic preference, but it seems that there may have been a little bit more of a reason to it than that, as Zelda states here.
The current chief of the Gerudo, Riju, used to have long hair reaching all the way to her waist, a style only permitted to Gerudo royalty. Today, however, she wears it cut short. I believe this is both in penance for not being able to stop the Divine Beast or the Yiga clan on her own, but also to give herself a goal to aspire to. By the time her hair grows long again, she must be a strong chief, like Urbosa was.
First of all, I was completely unaware that hair down to the waist was only reserved for royal family among the Gerudo. I am personally getting pretty close myself, so might need to back off, or the Gerudo royal family is gonna, I don't know, get me for insubordination or something. But that's a really cool fact to know. But apparently also Riju is once again being super strict on herself as she was in Breath of the Wild, not allowing herself to kind of grow into the Gerudo chief that she needs to be, and expecting herself to already be the chief that like Urbosa and her mother were as grown women when they became the chieftain. Since she needed Link's help to stop Naboris and the Yiga, she's cut her hair as in a way to say she's not yet worthy of such a royal privilege, but also she hopes to be strong by the time that her hair grows back out. Hopefully by then she can see that being a leader isn't just about brute strength and taking care of threats alone. Urbosa, after all, took 100 years with the aid of 4 other champions to stop Calamity Ganon. Now, each of the champions that we've seen in Breath of the Wild had special abilities, but also each got their own special weapons forged, specifically for them. Daruk's in particular has always stood out to me. Perhaps it's because it's the hardest one to miss with it being so huge. Now, Link, who is considered an extremely strong Hylian, and I do mean exceptionally strong in comparison to his soldier mates, has to carry the weapon with 2 hands. However, Daruk still carries around like it's a broadsword. Zelda actually spoke about its design right here.
This is the large sword that Daruk carried with him. He always held it as though it was light as a feather, but I believe it is actually a boulder breaker he had custom made to be twice as heavy as normal. Not only that, but when he became a champion, he increased its weight even more. There is a certain symbolism in this. Daruk was bold and friendly, but he carried an incredible weight without concern or complaint.
Not only is it two boulder breakers together, but when he became a champion, she said he increased its weight once again. And perhaps it was for symbolic reasons. Daruk was the one who called for all the ceremonies for Link in Breath of the Wild when he became the princess's appointed knight. Perhaps symbolism means a lot to him. Maybe in taking up the mantle as champion, he decided that the weapon a champion would carry a little bit more weight than just a normal Goron leader. Daruk showed time and time again he was willing to carry the weight of the whole kingdom on his shoulders if he had to. Well, as long as no dogs were involved. Now, one noticeable difference in Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom was the massive amount of wells that were installed. Each stable has one now, and it was apparently the Stable Association that decided to do this.
It was the Stable Association that came up with the plan for a well at every stable. It makes perfect sense to have access to clean water stores, but an additional aspect of the plan was for the well to serve as a shelter for the people in case of emergency. It is hard to forget the stories of rampaging guardians, their attacks scorching the land.
As people cross all over the land of Hyrule from region to region, the stables are one of the few places that people can stop for food or rest outside of just setting up camp somewhere. But they can also restock on supplies. Outside of actual settlements, it's one of the few places that exists with other people. However, people also know that these places are now places of refuge in case of another emergency such as the Calamity takes place. We learned in the voice memories from Breath of the Wild that the king was the one who actually established the Stable Association 100 years ago. He actually said in that voice memory, "There is more to protecting our people than simply fighting." And it seems that the Stable Association still holds to that motto today, creating another way to keep the people of Hyrule safe. And we learn in Breath of the Wild that the princess is supposed to inherit a sacred power, and though Zelda eventually does, I just assumed that they were simply going off the fact that every princess before had received it, or at least most had. However, it seems there's a little bit more to it than just that, with the addition of this voice memory right here.
I have visited this place and the Great Deku Tree countless times, but the very first was shortly after I was born, when the Great Deku Tree blessed me with a cherry blossom bud. It bloomed above my head, proving I had inherited the power of the goddess. Though Father was joyful at this, Mother's reaction was mixed. There was difficulty and pain in the journey that lay ahead for me, but I am, in the end, happy to have been blessed with this power.
I had no idea that the Princess of Hyrule could find out if they had the goddess's power through a cherry blossom budding over their head. I think in some ways this had to add to the pressure. Not only was it expected because of her lineage that she would have this power, but also because the bud proved that the power was within her. She just couldn't release it. The good thing is that Zelda seems to have kind of come to terms with how everything settled. But I do think that the king, if he had known the outcome and the weight that his daughter would carry, that he would actually share a little bit more of how the queen felt in this moment. Now, Tears of the Kingdom also brought back none other than Master Koga, and he really hasn't changed other than maybe being a little bit more relentless this time. And this memory I'm actually about to show you has maybe less lore implications, I suppose, and is just honestly a little bit more hilarious to me.
Aha! Is this the source of that horrible rotting smell? It is awful. I can't stand it. I hate it. I don't want to stop smelling it. Whoa. Little bit dizzy, Oliver. Hey, over there. Those aren't bokoblins. They're Yiga. Guys! Guys!
Now, the Muddle Bud was a new addition to the obtainable materials in this game. When shooting an enemy with one of these or throwing it at them, it confuses them, making it to where they can't tell friend from foe. This little memory, to me, was a complete embodiment of Koga's character. He might be a group of banana-loving ninjas, but not all of the marbles are there, you know? Just a few whiffs, and he thought some enemies had just magically turned into some of his friends somehow. You'd think a leader of a group would be a little bit more discerning than that. I don't know, though. Maybe bokoblins and Yiga have a similar build to them. So we know that Minoru was heavily involved in Zonai engineering and tech. She was essentially a Zonai genius, or at least seems to be. We learned through the memories that Koga has actually found one of Minoru's old notebooks. with a wealth of Zonai knowledge that he's trying to learn to decipher.
Turns out if I stare at Zonai letters long enough, I can learn to read them. It also turns out someone named Minoru wrote this notebook I found. They were apparently the last Zonai to manage this place. Anyway, I came here looking for prototype constructs, not a big owl statue. And that isn't a construct. Right?
But what caught my attention was where he found the notebook, according to this memory right here.
Is this some kind of grave? No bones, though. Not a grave after all, are you? I bet you're hiding something. Aha! A treasure chest! Aha! Now I'll just open... Rusted. Anything else here? Ah, a notebook. I can't read the letters, but... I know what this is. It seems luck hasn't abandoned me yet.
Now this location is the Gerudo Underground Cemetery, which of course this has me wondering if this is where Minoru was buried. I mean, her notebook was here, that makes a lot of sense. We know that she left her body behind as she separated her body from her spirit, and that's what gave us possibly our weirdest companion with the construct in the game. And so perhaps they buried her here, or she even chose to be buried here. However, I noticed something else. This may be just an absolute coincidence, but around this graveyard there are 5 elevated graves, making them seem to be a little bit more important status, I would think, the people buried in them, than the surrounding graves. We also know of 5 past people that had higher statuses that could be buried here. The 5 ancient sages. The sages of fire, water, wind, lightning, and of course Minoru, the sage of spirit. The other sages wouldn't be here because we know where they're at. Sonia is buried, like we mentioned before, in the Forgotten Temple. Rauru was binding Ganon for thousands of years, and if you want to include Zelda, you shouldn't because she's still alive. Now, it could just be coincidence that Minoru's notebook was here, or maybe they buried her here in the Gerudo Royal Grave, just as a choice, and the rest are Gerudo, but I think it's highly possible that this is the final resting place of all 5 ancient sages. Hey, Editing Jordan here. Just wanted to say real quick that I know that Master Koga says in this memory that these can't be grave sites because there's no bones. Maybe that's possible, but I kind of just thought, I mean, it's been a really long time. Maybe the bones decayed, or I don't know, maybe they turned into the Gibdos. Not really sure. I understand it's a possibility. I just still kind of think that the 5 sages are who was buried here. Now, in Tears of the Kingdom, all the abilities are pretty cool, one of which is Ascend. If anyone's like me, by the way, and you try to ascend at least once every time you play Breath of the Wild, just let me know down in the comments. I want to know that I'm not alone. But this ability allows you to travel through solid ground like you're swimming, like Chuck Norris would do. Is that too old of a joke at this point? However, it seems from that before mentioned notebook that Koga discovers that you can actually use it to transport things up to the surface.
So, obviously this was meant to send things to the surface. What I don't understand is how it moves things through the ground. The pictures in the notebook look like it just happens. They just go through. I don't get it. And I can't use this to send stuff to a base on the surface if I can't figure it out.
I'm not sure if there was a way to ascend without an operator of the ability, or if one had to be present for this to happen. If they did, I wonder how common it was for a Zonai to have this ability. Could any Zonai deliver things to the surface, or was it a very select few? Perhaps it could even be bestowed upon constructs, though I think if that was possible, we would have seen it in Tears of the Kingdom. I assume most of what these areas would be used for would be to send Zonite products to the surface. Anything that wanted to be brought down to the depths would probably have to be brought down in a separate trip through chasms, because we don't have a descend ability. I'd venture to say they would just carry minimal things down through the chasms to the depths because they had to carry it all on back, but perhaps the deliveries that would go up through ascend could be much larger. Now, these were the 15 most interesting and best memories in my opinion. I loved getting to dive into this new lore and this new information from these memories, and getting to see the characters that we all loved just a little bit more. Now I just can't wait until Age of Imprisonment comes out so we get a little bit more, hopefully specifically about the Zonai themselves. But if you guys like this video, I love Zelda stuff, I love Nintendo stuff, that's mostly what I do here. Please leave a like, hit the subscribe button, it helps out greatly. Appreciate you guys. Later, taters. I'll see y'all in the next one.